I'm always looking out for, edgy cars, especially really cool cars with really bad history that would make them not much less fun to own, but a lot less expensive to buy. And about 10 years ago, there was this guy, he was a Texas car dealer, and he had bought a 2006 Bugatti Veyron, and he had it up for sale and nobody wanted to buy it. And I think he bought it for like 1.2 million and had it insured for like 2.5. And that tends to cause some bad temptations. And so he was out driving it in Galveston, Texas, and decided to just drive it straight into the bay at speed. And he called his insurance and said, hey, a pelican flew in front of me. I got freaked out and I swerved and went in the water. And he left the motor running to allow a lot of water to get in. It was a real mess.
And salt water too.
Yeah, at least brackish. I'm not sure. It was definitely not good for anything. Rusted out everything. And the problem was, when you drive a car like this around, very frequently there are people with cameras filming you drive. And so there's this very famous viral video that I think has like 9 million views now of these guys going in the opposite lane saying, oh, there's a...
what kind of car is that? They call a Lamborghini or Ferrari or something?
I think that's a Lambo, dude. And and at that minute, it just drives straight into the water. And so this video... No Pelican. And so this video surfaces, and so he gets convicted of insurance fraud. And then he he tries to convince the insurance to like really tear the car down. So they do some work on it. And the guy that has it ends up, as all the litigation happens, he goes to prison for 10 months, gets out, and they sell it to another dealer who still is going to pay the same guy to fix it. That dealer steals a whole bunch of money, declares bankruptcy, but he had this huge loan against it. So there was a bank that loaned him a bunch of money on the car, not knowing that it was in pieces because the title was still clean. And there was nothing even on Carfax. Like Carfax doesn't say ran into a lake. And so they thought, oh, it's a perfectly good Bugatti. I think they loaned him like $900,000 on it. Then a lot of banks don't check. They don't see. And so after the bankruptcy, the bank repos it, but the guy has never been paid for any of the work he's done in disassembling or storing the car. And so he threatens to mechanics lien the car. The bank ends up just giving it to him. Then he sells it to some plastic surgeon that was going to fix it one day but never gets around to it. Then that guy decides he wants to sell it, and the original guy that drove it into the lake
rebought it,
becomes the broker listing it for sale and just puts it on Facebook Marketplace. And so I get bombarded. Like one day I will open up my phone, there's 500 messages across every platform like, Ed, you have to buy this thing. And I'm like, I do have to buy that. That's a fantastic thing. It was a $300,000 car that would normally be worth like $1.2 million, obviously in a million pieces, but supposedly complete. And the claim was that the powertrain was okay. Now, I've always wanted a Veyron. I'm fantastic. I tried to buy Tygas yesterday, but it's it's
really?
One of those, he's a little behind on his payments, I think. But it's one of those things that I want to find the cheapest one so that I can kind of insulate my financial risk, and I can float the loan. I can't afford for the car to depreciate or break in a terrible way, which it could do, but I want one, and I've made worse. I don't know if I've made any worse financial decisions than that, but I want to make that bad financial decision. And so I start talking to this guy, and it just becomes a mess. Like another mechanic had moved the parts and was holding some of them hostage. The windshield was missing. The wiring harness had been kind of compromised. And so I am not mechanically inclined, at least certainly not to the extent of that, but Freddie Tavares Hernandez, who has a channel of taking derelict and broken exotics and trying to put them back together, was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard of.
It's the holy grail for him.
Exactly. He's like, I'll do the work for free if I can make videos about it. And he was very confident he could do it. But the problem was that, I knew I was going to need probably at least $100,000 worth of parts, which I would not be able to finance. And I didn't know how I was going to come up with that. And then his time would probably take a year and a half of labor that he was okay not being paid for. But if he ever stopped, I'd have probably $200,000 liability there. And then the day it's done, you've still got this massive problem that you need a $25,000 set of tires and a $21,000 annual service and probably a $60,000 set of wheels.
Do you think that Bugatti would still accept that car to do the annual maintenance on? Because you basically ship it to them, right? For like a month or something?
There's 3 U.S. dealers that will service them, and they would. Yes, they would do the, I mean, they like making money. And now, if you wouldn't like send it back to Bugatti to be like rebuilt or certified or anything like that. But it's still, in theory, could become a car. And so as I kept adding it up, I'm like, I'm going to end up with $600,000 in this thing that I certainly didn't have. And even if I could find a way to get a loan for it and float it along, I was like, for probably 100 or 200,000 more, just a little bit more, I could probably get a real car. And so that's become the more responsible choice. Although I still don't know how I'd put that together.
Less YouTube friendly though. You'd get some good stories out of it.
That's right.
Do it for the content.
Do it, for the views.
For the views.
Which is, any of them, and that's the thing.
But you're still able to tell that whole story, which is still really cool.
Yeah, it is, and to have Freddie come on and tell his side of it, I think we enjoyed. So it's definitely one of those that got away, but.
But again, at the end of the story, he said, in 6 months it'll be back on the market when someone realizes that he can't build it back, and maybe even be a little bit further along in the building process, maybe a little bit. So who knows?
It could be, but the fallacy there is that someone else qualified has decided this doesn't make sense to continue. That will not deter Freddie. He will always believe that anything can be done. And I talked to him initially. I was like, all right, well. If the powertrain was compromised, like what could we do? Could we put a Huracan engine and transmission in it? It would probably fit. Like what do you do? And he's like, he thought that was impossible. He said like actually finding somebody to go through and nut and bolt rebuild the motor would be way cheaper than a swap. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. But I don't know. I don't know enough to argue with him. But it would have been fun. So I'll have to find something else. I tried to buy a Koenigsegg last month that...
Which one?
An 08 CCX. That's the only real, other than the newer Aguiras, that's the only one you can really drive in the U.S. I think there's 12 U.S. CCXs. And this one didn't have any miles on it, but it had somehow frozen in New York, and it had cracked the transmission case and the engine block, which seems impossible, but... absolutely happened.
Like upstate New York or something?
I guess. I don't know exactly where it was being stored. And it was owned by this guy who's got a giant car collection. And he had been kind of ready to get rid of the thing. Didn't know what to do with it. It was like, I think the quote from Koenigsegg was like $600,000 or $700,000 to, fix it. But, that's a real stick. So that, like it's stuff that could be rebuilt, maybe. Weld the block up and try. But the guy ended up betting it in a poker game and losing it to some guy, and that dude was just using it as decoration in his garage, and he did not want to sell it.
Wow.
The guy that ended up losing it in the poker game was like, surely this guy didn't have any attachment to it, but he does actually, so I didn't get it.
That's a pretty awesome garage decoration.
Yeah.
It's obviously like hard parked, as they say, but in more ways than one, but...
Many more.
That's pretty awesome.